Hello and welcome back to the Pose Factory. Let's get into a little deeper dive of the 4 pillars of masterful posture. Now, just one thing you can just memorize is IC, I-S-E-E, like I see. That can help you to memorize the intent, structure, effort, and expression. Now, what I wanted to dive deeper into was structure and effort, since that's really the primary focus for this particular training. The structures, I have 3 questions to ask ourselves throughout this training that will help us understand best decisions to make for structure. So first is foundation. What is touching the earth? Okay, that would be the first question that we ask ourselves. What is touching the earth? Is it our hands? Is it our feet? Or is it our forearms? Is it our head? And essentially that question is really about what is bearing weight? What is holding ourselves up? And then we have to then assess what we do with that area of the body that's bearing weight, because of course that is our foundation. That is the foundation that should hold us strong and is actually going to be whatever's holding us strong is necessary based on whatever's happening above. And we make choices on the foundation based on that. So if we understand, like say Warrior 3 is gonna have a certain type of weight to it that Tadasana doesn't. And it's partially because you're on one foot, but it's also partially because of how your torso is forward and the leg is back and things like this. So what's happening above really does affect the foundation, and that's something that we have to consider. You know, if we were to do something like a press handstand, for example, the amount of weight that goes in your hands in a press handstand feels significantly more than if you're just doing a straight balanced handstand. And that's partially because the bone structure in a straight balanced handstand, the weight is dispersed straight down through your bones into the earth versus and to initiate a press handstand, you have to put a lot more weight forward towards the fingertips. Now, this training is not about press handstand or anything fancy necessarily, but I just want you to understand there are differences in what happens above the foundation is going to make a difference for how we build our foundation, okay? And that's the same is true with a house. You know, when we have a building and you have a certain way that the roof is pitched, the amount of load or weight on that roof is how they determine how to build the foundation so that the weight transfer goes straight down through the earth in an appropriate way and the house can handle that, the roof line and everything, and also how high it is and so on and so forth. So the next question would be, what is the basic shape of the pose? Because we all recognize that, you know, when I say the word Warrior 2 or handstand, there are basic shapes. You know, there might be variations of those poses or expressions of those poses, but certainly, you know, there's a difference between Warrior 2 and triangle pose. We know it's something to do with the knee bend or where our torso is, right? So there is basic shapes, and as much as, you know, maybe we don't want to say we're fitting ourselves into shapes, it's true that we are creating shapes in a way, and we have names for those shapes. And of course, there are some restrictions. We can't just call a handstand Warrior 2 for basic linguistic purposes and for conversational purposes, and also for our own imagery in creating something. So there are some guidelines when we talk about the shape or the structure of the alignment that adheres a little bit to the name of the pose, so that we're all talking about the same thing, right? And when I say the word twisted monkey pose, not everybody knows what I'm talking about, because that posture is only named twisted monkey by a handful of people, right? Whereas when we talk about triangle pose or Warrior 2, most people have a general idea of the overall alignment. Now, we might have alignment differentiations, which we'll go over, and, you know, based on our intent and based on what I know of anatomy, I'm going to make choices that are, you know, a wide array. It's not so, what's the word, dogmatic or limited, but it does have to adhere to the shape to a degree if we were to call it that name, okay? Then the third question would be, what is the relationship to gravity? This is a huge, important question when we talk about structure. I just talked about it in handstand versus press handstand, but let's talk about it in something that everybody can kind of relate to. Tadasana versus chair pose, there's a big difference in how much that intensity that posture experiences, because it's shifting, it's counterbalancing its body weight. Whereas Tadasana, hopefully, we have this plumb line where the body weight is going straight down through our bones. Our bones don't really feel effort there, and it's like a really solid structure. The ground is actually taking the weight. But when we start moving the body in all different directions, you're going to start to feel that your muscles have to engage in a certain way in order to counterbalance or to stay remaining in balance. And that's where we kind of segue over here to effort. Okay, so with effort, we have to consider gravity as well. So the structure, gravity matters, huge. In choosing your alignment, you have to understand gravity, okay? Because if you understand gravity, then you can understand the general pull where, if you create a shape, for example, let's just stay with Warrior Two, the general pull is gonna pull your legs, your pelvis is getting pulled downward, which is creating the stretch as well as the alignment choice of separating your legs. But there's a gravitational force that is increasing the stretch of the muscles in something like Warrior Two or Hanumanasana, splits pose. Gravity is upon you, versus when you think about a posture like full wheel, in order to create that shape, you're working against gravity. And so the alignment is against gravity, but also your effort is against gravity in something like full wheel, which is why it's so difficult for a lot of people to get up off the ground, amongst other reasons, of course. So we have to take into account our alignment matters with gravity, our effort matters gravity, and gravity is something that most yoga teachers don't talk about, but we are definitely going to talk about it here in this training because it's massively important to how we engage and what alignment choices we make. Of course, our effort to create the structure. In order to take shape, you need to engage muscles. We'll stick with the easy example of chair pose. In order to sustain and create that pose, mostly to sustain, not even to create, your quadriceps need to engage, okay? So in order to maintain a certain shape, sometimes your musculature has to stay engaged. Now, the effort you place in the structure is also going to matter. What is the foundation? Meaning, is it a sticky yoga mat versus socks on a slippery floor? The socks on a slippery floor, the effort required to maintain a structure is going to be much greater than if the friction of your feet on a yoga mat. Okay, you may not require as much effort to maintain that structure. Okay, now the intent and style, and we could talk about, say yoga styles might decide to do postures differently, or your personal self-expression or your intent, you might place effort in different ways. Certain yoga styles, typically chromatic yoga is one that enjoys the application of effort, versus we talk about something like yin and restorative, those kind of styles. You're really trying to release the effort, or the effort is placed into relaxation, let's say. That's how we would explain it. It's still effort to try to focus your attention and relax and everything, but it's to try to release the amount of effort that you're doing. Okay, so the next step here in the effort column would be core and trunk. And now this is divided into 3 parts. And here's one really important thing that you need to pay attention to for this particular video, because it's gonna come throughout the whole training. And that's gonna be, what is the power point, what is the connective core, and expressive core? First of all, what are those things? Before we define what they are in a pose, we need to know what these things are. So our power point is, the area for which we are connecting our core to the foundation or towards what's bearing weight, okay? So a power point, there are 3 possible power points. It's the pelvis, what a lot of people would refer to the core, solar plexus region here, and the heart region, okay? So pelvis, center, or solar plexus, core, heart. Now, the center, the solar plexus region, is typically referred to as the connective core in this system. Again, these are terms I've created just to make things easier for us, because there are 3 parts to the core. When you think of core, a lot of us are just thinking, abdominal muscles, but our core is our trunk. It's this whole spinal column, rib cage, abdominal region, all the organs inside of it. And what I've come to realize is that in each pose, there is a focal point or a power point that matters most. And it affects our balance, and it affects our stability. It affects our power from transitioning in and out of poses. If you know where that power point is, you'll be able to move in and out of postures a lot easier. You know, for example, if you're standing on your 2 feet and you move your pelvis forward, in essence, there's gonna be a lot of power from that. Or if you think about shifting from your hips or holding from your hips to stay stable, that's the power point for anything really standing on your feet. It's where the extremities of the foundation, or whatever's connecting to the foundation, in this case the feet, whatever's bearing weight, whatever the closest point to the 3 is, that's the power point. So in the case of handstand, what's closest to the ground is the heart center. So the power point would, in this case, be the heart center. Okay, in the case of where the connective core here, the solar plexus region, this would be the power point in a scenario such as boat pose, okay? Even though the pelvis might be bearing the weight, the closest point to that, you know, when you think about the legs can shift around quite a bit, the arms can shift around. So these 2 points are free, more or less, where this might be the center that holds everything together, okay, and keeps everything intact. And typically you can think of this, the order of most importance for structure is power point, then connective core, and expressive core. What's the expressive core? Well, it's the thing that is not bearing as much weight. So in other words, if we're on our feet, it goes like this: power point, connective, expressive. Power point, because this is where all the weight is bearing and coming right into the hips, okay? And all the muscles that surround this area must be really strong and attentive and awake, and our nervous system has to be heightened there. But you can move your core around when you're standing on your feet like this in all different directions. So this is the connective core. It can do a myriad of things. It's not bearing so much weight, and its importance is not so significant to the structure. Whereas the power point, the pelvis in this case, standing on our feet, is very important. As a rule of thumb, whatever's touching the ground, the closest point of those 3 is going to be the power point. Except, you know, in the case of boat, we could make arguments, maybe it's the center, or maybe it is the pelvis. You know, we can explore that. But because the legs are really free to move in boat pose and do different things, I really think it's, for me, I would go towards the solar plexus region. Now, the expressive core is basically the least weight-bearing aspect. So in the case of Warrior 2, the power point, the connective core, and then the expressive core. It's, you know, you can do all sorts of things with your shoulder girdle and the upper heart and spine, you know, and neck. So in that case, the neck is going to be part of expressive core, which way you turn your head, how you move your shoulders, because your shoulder blades are part of connective core, where the shoulder joint is more on the expressive extremity side of things. Okay, so your shoulder blade connecting to the rib cage, that's all part of the expressive core when we talk about Warrior 2. Okay, but the expressive core, and say if you're doing an arm balance, you can think of it as like decoration. The expressive core is like, you can just, you know, play around with, you know, in let's say crow pose as an arm balance, the power point is going to be the heart center. The connective core, what connects the power point to the expressive core, is basically what the connective means, is going to be, of course, the midsection, solar plexus, and then the expressive core is going to be your legs and your feet. So let's say crow pose, you take that shape. Well, you can do pointed feet in crow pose, you can do flexed feet in crow pose, you can do something that's called everting the foot, inverting the foot, point, flex. All these, you can do different things with the toes. All those are freedom of expression that won't really affect the structure of the posture and won't necessarily affect the balance, maybe a little bit, you know, but it's minimal compared to the power point, where if you move your upper heart / shoulders forward back in a crow, it's going to make a huge difference as to whether or not you're balancing the posture. Okay, and then lastly we have, you know, expression, which, you know, is led to the expressive core, and it's the reason why we're doing this. But the question is, why are we placing effort? It might be to express ourselves in a certain way. For example, if we look at Warrior 2, the arms lifting up to this point versus this point, different types of effort is applied. and therefore different forms of expression create different muscle engagements. You know, in chair pose, you might choose feet together versus feet apart. You might choose arms together, hands together, you know, or warrior one, if your palms are together overhead, that's a deeper, more intense effort than if your palms are apart. And so you might, based on your personal expression or even your style, you might apply more effort or less effort. Okay, so this system, the structure and effort, is what we're going to be applying. I can't wait to talk more about these, but the next video is going to talk about the options for foundation. We have 3 different ways of placing the hands that I'm going to go over and 3 different ways of activator placing the feet. See you on the next one.